And now I present you with our speaker today, Robert Allen.
So again, good morning, everybody. My name is Robert Allen. I am the choir director here at U2C3. My mom listed off a bunch of the accomplishments that I have had. I did want to mention one more. I just crossed my 10-year anniversary with an organization called Phi Mu Alpha Sinfonia. It is a musical service fraternal organization. And of which I have been a chapter president 3 years and the alumni representative officer of Corpus Christi for 3 years as well, which I am just finishing my, I'm not going to run again. So today I'm going to be discussing protest music and its deep connections with Unitarian Universalism. This rich tradition is enshrined in our hymnals as a reminder of the trials and tribulations many of our members have faced in the perseverance of justice, equity, and love. While I will be focusing primarily on the labor and civil rights movements, I would like to start with some background on our subject. Protest music has been around for centuries, with roots dating back to ancient times. In ancient Greece, for example, there were many songs and chants that were used to express dissent and challenge authority. During the Middle Ages, protest music took on a much more religious tone, with songs and chants that were used to challenge the authority of the Catholic Church. One of the most famous examples of this is the plain chant, Dies Irae, which was written in the 13th century and was often used in funeral services to remind mourners of the inevitability of death and the importance of repentance. Well, I'd like to sing this little bit for you. You might recognize this, and I also have some examples of where this has been used in a more broader sense. It goes, Dies Irae, Dies Illa, solvet saeculum in favilla, teste David cum Sibylla. I have two translations for the Latin for this. So the first one is day of wrath and doom impending, David's word and Sibyl's blending, heaven and earth in ashes ending. But the more accepted translation is day of wrath, that day will dissolve the world in ashes. This is the testimony of David along with Sibyl. Well, this chant has been used by many composers as a musical motif. If you're not familiar with that word, motifs are short bits of music that portray characters and stuff oftentimes. So Peter and the Wolf, that's a really good example of musical motifs. So this motif often conveys themes of death, judgment, and despair. Some of the examples that I have are Mozart's Requiem Mass in D minor, Hector Berlioz's Symphonie Fantastique, Giuseppe Verdi's Requiem, Sergei Rachmaninoff's Symphonic Dances, and Franz Liszt's Totentanz. So moving on a little bit further in time, considered to be one of the first protest songs is the Ballad of Captain Kidd, which is an English folk song that tells the story of the infamous pirate Captain William Kidd. The song first appeared in print in the early 18th century around the time of Kidd's trial and execution for piracy and murder. The lyrics of the ballad describe Kidd, a pirate, executed by the British government in 1701 as a brave and noble figure who stands up to the corrupt and oppressive authorities of the time. The song portrays him as a defender of the poor and oppressed, who uses his wealth and power to help those in need. The ballad has been interpreted in various ways over the years. Some have seen it as a celebration of piracy and lawlessness, while others see it as a critique of the corrupt and oppressive institutions of the time, such as the British East India Company and the monarchy. Briefly going back to classical music, one of my favorite examples of defiance through music comes from one of the most famous composers and famously temperamental men. It's Beethoven. So for Beethoven's Third Symphony, also known as Eroica, you may have heard this piece before. There's a little saying that goes along with it. Oh my word, it's Beethoven's Third. Beethoven originally dedicated this piece to Napoleon Bonaparte, who at the time represented ideals of the French Revolution and was seen by many as a champion of freedom and equality. Beethoven greatly admired Napoleon and saw him as a hero who would bring about a new era of political and social change in Europe. However, when Napoleon declared himself Emperor of France in 1804, Beethoven was deeply disillusioned and angered by what he saw as a betrayal of the revolutionary ideas that Napoleon had once represented. In a fit of rage, Beethoven reportedly stormed into his study and crossed out the dedication to Napoleon on the page, leaving the score with just a ripped hole where the name used to be. More traditionally speaking, though, the origins of protest music here in the United States stems from black spiritual music. Many spirituals were explicitly political in nature, expressing a longing for freedom, justice, and serving as a form of protest against the injustices of slavery. For example, songs like Steal Away and Swing Low, Sweet Chariot were widely understood to contain coded messages about the Underground Railroad and the possibility of escape to freedom. In addition to these songs, Christian hymns were often used in protest movements. One reason for this is that hymns are often written in simple, memorable form that is easy to sing and to remember. This makes them ideal for protest settings where large groups of people may need to quickly and easily learn a song in order to participate in a demonstration or other type of collective action. Many hymns also contain themes of justice, compassion, and social responsibility that can be easily adapted to express a protest message. For example, the hymn Amazing Grace has been adapted for the use in a variety of protest contexts, from the civil rights movement to anti-apartheid protests in South Africa, because of this emphasis on the power of redemption and the need for justice. At this point, I can finally bring up the connections between this tradition and our religion. Unitarian Universalism and protest music have long been intertwined. Many prominent protest singers and songwriters have been associated with Unitarian Universalists, and their congregations have used music as a way to express their social justice values and support various causes. This commitment to social justice is reflected in the hymns and songs used in worship services and other congregational events, which often address issues of peace, civil rights, and environmental sustainability. Many famous protest singers, such as Pete Seeger and Joan Baez, have been Unitarian Universalists. Seeger, in particular, was an active member of the Unitarian Universalist congregation of Beacon in New York, and his music reflected his commitment to social justice and environmentalism. Seeger, in particular, is important to discuss because of his work in the American labor movement in the 1930s and 40s, which would lay the groundwork for many later movements. His early career began with performing at union rallies and protests, often playing his banjo and leading sing-alongs of protest songs. He was a member of the Almanac Singers, a group of musicians who wrote and performed songs in support of labor unions and other progressive causes. During World War II, Seeger served in the Army and continued to use his music to support the labor movement, performing for soldiers and writing songs that expressed his anti-fascist and anti-war views. After the war, he continued to be active in the labor movement, performing at union rallies and organizing benefit concerts to raise funds for striking workers. In the 1950s and 60s, Seeger became a prominent figure in the folk music revival, using his music to express his support for civil rights, peace, and other progressive causes. He was a close friend and collaborator with Woody Guthrie, and together they wrote and performed songs that became anthems for the labor and civil rights movements, such as This Land Is Your Land and We Shall Overcome. Joan Baez became the most prominent performer of the latter song, which became a rallying cry for the civil rights movement in the 1960s. She used her music to raise awareness about issues of racial inequality and social justice, and she actively participated in protests and demonstrations alongside civil rights leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. Here are just a few examples of her work. So in 1964, Joan Baez traveled to Mississippi to participate in the Freedom Summer, a voter registration drive that was organized by civil rights groups. She performed at rallies and helped to organize demonstrations in support of the campaign. Baez was one of the performers at the historic March on Washington in August of 1963, where Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. Baez participated in the Selma to Montgomery March in 1965, where she sang "We Shall Overcome" alongside other activists. Baez's involvement in the civil rights movement helped to bring attention to the struggle for racial equality and inspired others to become involved in the fight for social justice. Her music and activism continue to serve as a powerful reminder of the importance of using our voices to speak out against injustice and inequity. As we moved from singing the songs of the civil rights movement to protesting the Vietnam War, the UU Church played an important role in ending the Vietnam War. In 1971, Daniel Ellsberg, a former military analyst who had helped prepare the Pentagon Papers, secretly photocopied the report and gave it to UU minister Reverend William Sloan Coffin Jr. and his colleague, Dr. Benjamin Spock, who were a part of a group called Citizens Commission to investigate the FBI. The UU members helped distribute the documents to major newspapers, including the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Boston Globe, which published them despite the government's efforts to block their publications. But obviously, the sounds of resistance didn't stop with them. At this time, I would like to bring up one of my Symphonian brothers, Glenn Michael Hughes. Well, that name may not be familiar to you, but you will know his face from his nearly 20-year stint as Leatherman in the Village People. So the Village People were a disco group formed in the 1970s, known for their flamboyant costumes and upbeat dance music. While they were not explicitly a political group, their music and performances became associated with the gay rights movement and helped to promote greater acceptance of the LGBTQ+ people. YMCA, the Village People's hit song, became an anthem for the gay community in the 1970s. The song's catchy chorus and dance moves became a popular feature at gay clubs and events, and it became a symbol of the LGBTQ+ pride and solidarity movements. And moving into the 1990s, I'd like to talk about Tom Morello and Rage Against the Machine. They were a heavy punk group that used their music to voice their disdain of the government. Morello was a Harvard grad, so he graduated from Harvard with a Bachelor of Arts degree in social studies and used his musical influence to shine a light on some of the ugliest parts present within our society. The band frequently performed at benefit concerts and rally in support of various causes. For example, they played at the Battle of Los Angeles concert in 1999, which was held to protest the Democratic National Convention and support the movement against police brutality. Finally, I would like to mention a few artists that are still releasing protest music today. So I guess the first one, y'all might say, oh, maybe not, but Beyonce. So her music has been used a lot recently, so All the Single Ladies, Lemonade are just a few that have been used alongside the female empowerment and Me Too movements. Jay-Z, Kendrick Lamar, and Donald Glover, better known by his stage name, Childish Gambino, have also released music about racism and police brutality. That, in my opinion, depict a very real version of the America that we live in. Again, purely my opinion, I believe that the most important song of the last decade is Childish Gambino's song, This Is America. I wanted to play the video for y'all, but probably that's not a great idea. It has some violent themes, but again, very, very important to what is going on right now. I highly recommend you, on your own time, go search this video up because it's very, very poignant. That will actually take us into our last selection of the afternoon. My closing piece today is a piece called La Jura, which means the oath sworn in Spanish. So this song is, again, about police brutality. They are a group that is based out of Los Angeles, so y'all know that there's some problems over there with the police. So I really hope that you enjoy our last song today. It's very important to me. Again, thank you so much.